Welcome, everybody, Inside the Music with your host, Stereo Russ. 2025, great time to be alive. I just made that up right now, and we'll stick with it. We'll stick with it. We have a very special guest today. Holy smokes. Like a holy smokes guest. We've got Jesse the Cannon. Jesse Cannon in the house. Jesse, how you doing today?
I'm great. I'm really psyched to be here.
I got to say, here's something before we get into this. I just want to say, like, Jesse, he's a music marketing nerd, record producer, author, podcast producer. Like, he is the guy. And when I look at people who I admire doing this online, you're one of the names that come to mind. And here's the funny thing, Jesse. Mm-hmm. I was looking through Instagram to see who follows me also follows you. Mm-hmm. None of my followers.
Huh.
Like zero.
That's really interesting.
Isn't that interesting? Because everyone who follows me is a music person, an artist, etc. And there isn't one. So I think that really speaks to like how siloed everything is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I'm obsessed with this discussion these days.
Like, how do you feel about that? The fact that like literally nobody in my planet follows you right now.
So there's this really interesting thing, and obviously that's on Instagram, so that's one of the silos. But what I think is so interesting is, I never really went hard on Instagram until this last. Really, it's not even been a year yet that I've like ever really tried on there, and one of the things I started seeing is, I have office hours where I talk to different people, basically whoever wants to book in can book in, and I'd say to people, well, have you seen my YouTube video on X? And they go, you have a YouTube?
And really?
So for the audience, I've been doing YouTube for 5 years. I have millions upon millions of views and like hundreds of videos and 100,000 subscribers. And so then it became a hint to me that also what people always told me is I can't watch your videos because like my job's too demanding. And I'm like, what do people do at their desk all day? Oh, they read newsletters. So I started turning all my videos into newsletters because of that. And then what did I see is now all the newsletter people go, even though my YouTubes are in it, they go, you have a YouTube channel?
I can't believe that because I found you through YouTube.
Yeah, that's most people.
Yeah, so most people find you through YouTube, and I think we put the cart before the horse a little bit here. So, Jesse, before we really hop into things, who the heck are you?
I market music, and I've produced a lot of records is what I'm mostly known to people for. I produce two of the biggest political podcasts in America, and then some ones that are very popular that have won a lot of awards, and in addition to all that, I'm the editor of Music Marketing Trends, which I have been told recently by an analyst is the fastest growing music business newsletter, which
hey,
I'd like to believe that's true. I didn't get to check their data. What I do is I share what I learned working with really small artists on up to artists with 18 million monthly listeners. And I am lucky enough to get to work with a bunch of my favorite artists of all time, and I basically just then share what I learn. I don't necessarily share it with their data and necessarily their own secrets, but I share the common knowledge that everybody should know, and because I believe music should be demystified that way. And I had a great record production career for over 20 years, and I retired from that because I did not want to tell 18-year-olds to tune their guitars anymore.
You graduated from that.
Yeah, it got old after a while. I started producing records when I was 15, so it gets old.
That's okay. So for those who probably are listening, I'm sure they have seen you and maybe they're not following, but I guarantee that people who watch my show and watch the clips, like they know who you are. So for those people, I want to ask, and you kind of alluded to it, like were you a musician first, or were you always a fan of music? Like, what was it?
I wanted to be a cop when I was 9 years old. And
Great,
then
cool.
I'm like watching MTV and Guns N' Roses come on the screen, and I'm like, those guys are getting girls. They look cool. They got tattoos. They're smoking cigarettes. Cops. No, I gotta be like that. And so I played in bands, and then when the record producer at the local studio my father was kind enough to shepherd us into turned up the reverb really loud on my punk band, and I said, no, that sounds like hair metal, dude. This shit sucks. And he wouldn't listen to me and wouldn't turn it down because I was a kid. I was like, all right, I'll learn how to do it myself. So back then it was analog days. I learned how to record on analog tape. By the time I was 18, I'd recorded hundreds of bands. I was working at this radio station, WFMU, recording some of the coolest indie rock bands because WFMU was all volunteer run. So they were like, this kid wants to come in and record all the time, and he shows up when no one else will show up. We'll let him do this thing, and he seems to be good at it. And and then by the time I was 20, it was hard for me to be in bands because I had so many production offers all the time. And I was recording a lot of bands in New York City where I was living, and New Jersey where I was half living between work-wise. And like between the two states, I had a really big pool of like punk, emo, and then like lots of weird rock bands. And even my first thing was engineering a big hit top 40 rap song. So like I also got really lucky that I was one of like the first 3 or 4 people who had Pro Tools in New York.
What era are we talking here?
So the Pro Tools era, the song that came out that was the big hip hop song, came out on this day that was very unfortunate for a song to come out, September 4th, 2001. Mm-hmm. So no one wanted to hear that song after the week after that, but I started producing pretty regularly and had my first releases come out in 1996 on vinyl. So I was still in high school then.
That's awesome. And this is all New York City or New Jersey?
Yeah, like I grew up in a suburb outside of New York City. So I was basically bouncing between the two all the time.
Yeah. I'm out in Toronto,
Got it.
Like suburb Toronto. So it's the same idea. Like you're in it, but you're not, but then you are a part of it. And yeah I feel that.
You people in Toronto love creating content these days. Every time I see somebody creating content these days, it's like they're Toronto based.
Really? Maybe the algorithm is just telling you you've got to come visit.
That must be what it is. It also does not help that I watch a lot of YouTube of people who've broken their brain on politics, and there's a whole scene of that up in Toronto.
Yeah, I mean, I think that scene is... I can't open my phone right now without politics punching me in the face, so...
Yeah, that's right.
But when it's not punching me in the face, I see you come up on my feed. And
Nice.
you come up on my feed, like, at least I would say daily. And this is... I want to set up this question for you. Mm-hmm. So, I'm on my feed, and I actually... So I'm on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And I actually find that, like, TikTok gives me a lot of political stuff. Mm-hmm. YouTube kind of gives me, I don't know, like a mix of like long form stuff that I watch, and they kind of splice into short form. But Instagram, because that's like my big thing for my music, it gives me a lot of music stuff.
Yeah.
So that's
same.
the one that I end up like going to all the time because, okay, this is what I'm actually interested in, not what you want me to listen to. So you come up all the time. And it seems like you come up with things daily, and every time you come up with something, it's like you're not really recycling. I mean, there is some, but like not really. Like I want to know how you come up with the content, like what your process is. Do you just like wake up and you're like, this is what I'm thinking, is what I'm doing? Do you got a schedule? Like how do you do it?
Okay, yeah, that's actually very easy to do. So one of the things to realize is I do get to draw from a much bigger pool than most people. So in 2009, what happened was I was a record producer, and what I kept noticing is bands would say to me, we just made this great record. How do we get it heard? You seem to know a lot about this. And, I was very interested in the marketing stuff. I'd been doing a lot of the marketing stuff. And so I decided, instead of writing the same email 1,000 times, to start putting on a blog. So that's what was MUSFORMATION. MUSFORMATION in 2009 was a blog that was getting millions of views.
And that was peak blog days, right?
Yes, exactly. Like I'm like basically reading the Huffington Post for news each day, and I'm like, why don't I make the Huffington Post for this? And that's what me and my partner Todd did. Is our content would be everything from like Roland just put out this new technology called an SP404 onto like, watch this artist use this onto music business stuff where it was just like, this is what Atlantic Records has done that's really stupid. But what I noticed is like when we looked at our content, and there was two things that did really well was me and my partner dissecting what makes songs tick, and me talking about how you actually get your music heard. And the music heard just kept going up, 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 and up. So since 2009, I really, really studied that. And then I started managing bands again around there. I'd managed some bands when I was younger too. But what really made the big difference is that I kept studying and studying and studying and studying this stuff and like really living it, and then working with a lot of artists where I, one, did a lot of experimentation. Now, the other advantage I have is that I have traditionally lived in the neighborhood where the music business goes to drink. And as somebody who, until I got married, would probably be out 5 nights a week at the least. If I'm not drinking, I would at least be eating buffalo wings at a bar, drinking some water, and talking to people.
I know this feeling, by the way.
Yes. There you go. So you know the lifestyle. When you do that, you get a pool of knowledge that is very vast and diverse. So what I've then had is I take in a very huge inspiration diet. I put things in my calendar to take in and read things that are not people's normal sources. A lot of people just read Billboard or digital music news. I'm reading a lot of things. I'm also analyzing a lot of things. So what I then do to get to how the sausage gets made is I take a lot of notes into an app called Notebook LM by Google, which was designed by Stephen Berlin Johnson, who I consider to be one of the great authors of our time. And what it allows me to do is it allows me to pull from my source of notes and use it to generate more ideas. Now, when I say generate, a lot of people think ChatGPT generate. No. Like, I'm looking at my own writing in things, but I'm using it to look up what I've created. And so then from there, what I do is I talk on different subjects. I write videos for my YouTube channel, and then I write videos for my member feed. My member feed is on YouTube, which is $5 a month. You can watch me basically go through what's changed in the music business each week in music promotion, what cool things I've seen, and then each week I do like a big dissection of like an artist who's doing something cool, the cheat codes and what works in a certain genre. Or, for example, I may do, here's a guide to astroturfing, a nefarious way to build your fan base. I'll just do something like that, and then my audience, then my assistant, wrong word.
Shout out to your assistant, by the way.
Yeah, well, there's a few of them.
Shout out to all of them. Shout out to all of them.
Yes. This is not the one you dealt with. But Nick is a lovely, lovely genius kid, and what he then does is he takes what he thinks I said is interesting, and turns it into scripts in my voice, then after that, what do you call it? I go in, I tweak it a little bit more to my voice, and then we batch tape them, and then something comes out every single day.
Do you edit them yourself, or is that Nick's? Is Nick do the post as well?
Nick does the editing on them, and then he sends them to me to make sure I don't catch anything. Like, a good example is like we both missed something the other week, and it drove up the comments a ton because it was like tiny little inaccuracies, and then I'm reminded, you want to do something for engagement and make the video popular? Do a tiny mistake everyone can catch, and it'll make your video real popular.
You know, it's funny about that, because I've had a few that have gone like big, and they always end up being like, maybe not mistakes in my case, but like things that were borderline controversial. And
yeah, totally.
Right? Like, do you find the same thing with your stuff?
Borderline controversial is what do you call it? What I like to say these days is this: the type of thing that gets someone who is very not bright, very angry is the best content. But the type of thing that also is just the thing where anyone can engage with it. So like my most controversial one, the one I when I looked and I was like, what got the most content? I said, your album cover is the least important thing to devote your budget to. And it made people so angry because everybody could discuss it. But then once we discussed it a lot, it was the funniest one because it was the one where most of the time people have their heels dug in on any discussion. People are like, you're right. Once I reasoned with them more, it's like, yes, I'm not saying album covers aren't important, but I'm saying if you have $80, mix, master, it's a lot of things to do.
Yeah, our album art is at the bottom of that pile. That's what you're suggesting.
That is what I'm suggesting.
Okay, good to know, because I've got an album cover. I've got a song that I'm releasing soon, and I'm like, I got to make an album cover. I'm like, I might just throw something together and see what happens. But yeah. So I have a question then about like your like strategies, because like I've been watching you now for years. I don't know how many years have you been doing it. Like I've been a fan of yours for
about a little over 5 for me right now.
Sure. So sometime probably like 2021, I probably started following you. So whatever that is. And I haven't gone back to your old videos, but I have to think that strategies have changed.
So I can get in here and I'll tell you the funny thing is, I often go back to this thing that, which so funny is when you have a feedback mechanism like YouTube comments, that what a misperception is versus a perception. And so a very funny thing I go to all the time is that people see the age of these videos and they see how fast, because technology is moving faster than ever. My friend Douglas Rushkoff, who was one of the smartest people alive, the best futurist. Doug says the biggest thing that changed in our society is everybody used to be afraid of the future, but now they're afraid of the present, and that they're like, what the fuck is going on? This is crazy how fast things are moving. But the music business, I know very well of how much I have to update things. So with my book, Get More Fans, people are like, oh, it must go out of date next month. I'm like, yeah, like something small like the name of a company will go out of date. But the main principles, and that book is 11 years old now. Next month it turns 11. And most of my videos, when I update them, I really have to update them for like 8 to 10 sentences out of like, we're sometimes talking, these are 27,000, or I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I'm right. 2,400 words, 2,700 words videos, and like maybe 16 words got out of date a lot of the time.
Fascinating.
Now, what I will say is over 2 years, sure, it sometimes can be more big, but like I've been doing that channel for 5 years. And if you watched my first guide to how to build a fan base, I think I added about 6 minutes for TikTok because like TikTok wasn't as prevalent in 2019.
Right, exactly.
But changed a few little things, but it is largely the same video as it's been. The funniest thing is a lot of what I've taught has aged into being more true, which is like, for example, that the best cadence to release music is every 4 to 8 weeks. Now, I used to say 6 to 8 weeks because some genres have sped up a little bit more.
Like what?
But I think trap, I think there's certain types of EDM have gotten a lot faster. What I would say is it's a lot of the music where it's not where it's much more about making a vibe real quick and less about making a very epic production. Like trying to write symphonic metal pieces to put out 6 of them a year is a tough task.
Do you think that there's space? Because I am definitely more like traditionally more from like the prog scene. Like that's I loved that growing up. But I find that as I'm getting older, maybe I just have less time, but also just like how fast everything's going. Like my songs are getting simpler and simpler and simpler. Like, is there space still for like really complicated music?
No, I mean, everything is popular right now. And, one of the things I will remind people is that not this last year, but in 2023, the most streamed metal band was Sleep Token, who beat Metallica at that, even though Metallica put out a record that year. And I would argue Sleep Token is some complex music. I think even too, one of the things we see is like, tech house is a little bit more complex than some things. We're seeing a lot of the rage rap trend right now, which is definitely like kind of, I don't know if it's going to usurp trap because trap is such an easy entry point, but rage rap's getting very, very popular very fast. And rage rap is definitely more complex than, than most trap.
Yeah, I find trap's like the pop punk of the rap world. It's like the most
100%.
most accessible, easy to emulate, and all that. Okay, so I have a couple like strategy related questions for you, just to kind of throw at you. Then, and this kind of goes to what you're saying, how like your stuff is timeless, effectively, right? So, how obviously like things change. So, for example, like TikTok didn't exist back then. Like a couple years ago, now it has. Like, what are some tried, tested, and true things that like? In what ways has the game not changed in the past like 10, 20, 30 years?
Okay, so the funniest thing that I think has happened now is there was a couple years where email was waning and it wasn't as good. And now email has gotten really good again.
Really?
One of the funniest things we've been laughing about lately is that for younger people now, downloading music and getting a download of a song is becoming novelty and fun to them.
Okay.
That to me is hilarious because in the pre-Spotify era, the best thing we could do was trade a track for an email. If you could get a email for those tracks and build a good email list, I could build a really good live foundation and a really good streaming foundation. And what I think is like very funny about all of this is that what you basically see over and over and over again is some things will wane a little bit and then they come back in. Now,
Sure.
TikTok, I would say, was a very big colliding force, but here's the really funny thing is that like people releasing music on a regular cadence until you hit what we call saturation, where it now has become annoying how long you've been around. And then you have to do the rubber band theory, which is the like what very big artists like a Kendrick Lamar or Frank Ocean's been doing forever is pulling away, but like when you pull a rubber band away, it vibrates a little, so there's some motion, but not really much, and then you spring forward and then it shakes like all hell, and that's the big vibration. So that's what you're doing when you've achieved saturation. But before saturation, just constantly inundating people with things, there's no doubt about that. That has been the dominant theory for, I would argue, somewhere around 05, 06.
You could almost argue like that would probably be the case even like the 90s and 80s. Like until you've made it, until you've been signed to a label, you're going, right?
Here's a really interesting thing. There used to be this very big case for in the 70s, 80s bridge that if you actually look at the clip most artists put out records, you were seeing artists put out full-length records, sometimes 9 to 14 months was a very average thing you were seeing.
Zeppelin 1 and Zeppelin 2 were both released in the same year.
Yeah. And so you get to these groups like, like the Devos and all these things that are like churning out this music at a clip that is just incredible. But then what we started to see is like you needed these label machines to be able to act really effectively. And the labels, while they were robust back then, they weren't robust to have the A-team. And there's a very good, great book about this, Appetite for Self-Destruction by Stephen Knopper. I think it's the greatest book ever written about how the music business works. Is that you would get like Tommy Mottola, for example, and he'd decide, my wife Mariah Carey needs this publicist on it. But they're like, well, the problem with that, buddy, is like this artist has the record coming out. We need them on that. And he's like, my wife Mariah Carey's getting there. Like, and so the problem you'd have is you'd want the A-team to be on for things. And what record releases started to become was and you would see artists the way like Halsey and all of them were lashing out in their day, or were lashing out about TikTok recently. The way it would lash out then was, I turned in my album 10 months ago. And you would see that all the time. And it wouldn't be vinyl delays like it was 2 years ago. It would be that what you would see regularly all the time is that it would actually be that like you needed the staff and the staff couldn't do it. And then the other problem you had was indie labels too, was that a big indie label just wouldn't be agile enough. Like Epitaph Records revolutionized the way indies worked when that they would start to literally put they would hire employees per 2 artists they signed. And then what they would do is they'd have you on an artist who is off album cycle and on an album cycle. So you'd be like, all right, you're barely going to get any requests for this artist because they're off album cycle. So you can handle that one and this one that's on album cycle at the same time.
Interesting. So I want to talk a little bit about saturation. So most of my guests are, I would say, pre-saturation, or
Sure.
I shouldn't say
most musicians are.
Right, exactly. When I say guest audience, it's like all that. So what are like? I see a lot of your videos. Some of them come up and they say like, great ideas on a small budget, and then it's like, yeah, like it's so motivating. I'm like, yeah, okay, I can do that. Small budget, let's do it. And then I like go and sit down and I think. And when I say I'm like, I feel like I'm speaking for the collective. I'm like, I'm like, okay, now just to come up with an idea on a small budget, and then like nothing comes.
Yes. Very common.
Okay,
so
help us out.
Okay, so there's a kind of a 3 colliding force thing that needs to happen for inspiration. So the first thing is a technique I developed. So when I was working with a lot of big artists, a lot of times what they would do is they'd focus on the SWOT analysis. Now, for anybody who doesn't know what the SWOT analysis is, a corporate structure used by the biggest dorks at McKinsey and Bain, just guys who are just the biggest hacks in the world, where they would analyze strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So what I started to realize is the problem with looking with musicians at this is it excluded all the art, and music is marketed so much more different, especially in a post-2015 Empire world, that what you do need to consider is like a brand doesn't need to consider lore as much as an artist does. A brand doesn't need to be authentic, and a brand can shapeshift into all sorts of different ways because it doesn't really have an authentic personality within itself unless as a spokesperson or a CEO who's very out front. Then it becomes a different story. So I made this thing called a LAMES analysis. And what it does is it basically focuses on who you are as a person, what we're trying to get to, which is the A in LAMES aspirations, where what your misconceptions are. Oftentimes, a good example, female artists. One of the biggest misconceptions we have to constantly deal with is they can be the best songwriter on earth, and everybody's like, she was born female. She can't write a song. I'm a fucking moron. And so then what we have to do is show they actually write the songs. A thing that I consistently show that, I don't need to go down that. Let me stay on subject and not be ADD for once. Okay. So what the LAMES analysis does is it makes it so we have something we can stare at when we're making content, and let's say we have 5 ideas, we can know which one is best. Because what we should be doing is working towards the aspirations, the artist's aspirations, using their strengths and building lore in everything we do, and we can use those to it. Then we could look at the E, which is for exploits. Exploits might be, so we're doing content, let's say your father owns a Bob's Big Boy. Great. Are you going to DJ on top of the Bob's Big Boy guy? Great. Okay, maybe that's what we're doing tomorrow.
That's actually a great idea. I'm into that.
there you go. You're up there with the CDJs. So anyway, this teaches us what we can be doing with this. So then what we have is the studying your community. So I have this video that says my most important video, where what I talk about is that like you need to understand the people around you and everything there. Because like one of the things, like I think even I just talked to an artist the other day, and they had like this great idea, and I had to show them that this is a great idea, but it's already done fully. It was like a mask idea, and I'm like, you just haven't studied your community. This guy sounds just like you too.
Right.
And so knowing your community, though, is also like knowing touchstones, getting inspired, and knowing who to work with, like what colors are there, whether you should be using them, whether you should be rebelling. You understand what the landscape is.
Should people? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No,
Yeah,
please.
The last wrap up of this I'll say
Of course.
is then get inspired. So inspiration can come from lots of places. What I tell everybody is if you're trying to do TikTok videos, you should probably make a separate account where you hit not interested every time you see the guy with the ducks and like some girl half naked and click a heart and bookmark every time you see something you like, comment if you see something you really like, and in about an hour you'll have a TikTok that is only things you mostly like. You were talking about how Instagram mostly shows you musicians. I've gotten TikTok to stop showing me politics because I want it to be a happy, peaceful place for my brain when I like scroll through it. I read politics all day. I'm probably one of the best. If you put me in Americans who read the most about politics, I will come in the top 0.01%.
Yikers. Okay.
I do not need to see it in TikTok.
Yeah.
So the point being, I have a place I could study all day. And it makes me happy. It's great to watch music all day on there. But most people don't take in the inspiration and then write out how their ideas come. Now, that shouldn't just be people who are just like you. The most of the artists I see that are doing really exceptional things are a country artist who then sees a heavy metal act do something and they go, what if I brought that to country? And so like this conscious studying of a large community is really what I see that makes it so that you're not sitting there going, well, what do I do? If you have those three things there, there's a lot to draw from.
So clean up your feed, get inspired by outside influences, and figure out your community. That sounds like
and look within yourself with the Lames analysis. You got to look within yourself at the right thing to do.
Well, I think that too. Like I think about like my radio show. Like I do music. I write music and I do the radio and all that. And it's like I didn't go into it being like I'm gonna do it this way. Mm-hmm. So a part of this is like yes, and I want your like comment on this comment, but something about should I think so hard on it or should I just do something and then see where it takes me? Like, does that ever work?
Okay, so this is the problem is that this is like answering for two very different personality sets. So one of the things I wrote years ago, I wrote this book called Processing Creativity about the creative process of making music. And basically I took my knowledge of everything I've seen gone wrong in a studio and then I read 200 books on creativity science. So the problem we have is there are some people who their problem is they have analysis paralysis and they'll think forever and never release things. Then we have people who do not think hard enough about what they do and think shit is great. They see the blurriest video that is totally unengaging and boring. They're talking, they're saying, there's a 1 minute pause while they collect their thoughts and they think it's the best video that should have 3 million views. And so the problem is we have to compensate for those personalities on an individual basis. So should you be precious? Should you do it? We first have to do an analysis of what is your problem and what are we trying to get here.
Okay, I love that. And I do want to plug something right now. For those listening, Jesse Cannon, music marketing, you say nerd, I'm going to say wizard. You do consulting, right?
Yeah, I do a lot of consulting. It's what I do most of the day, yeah.
Okay, so I'm in Toronto and I hear this and I want to reach out. Like, would you work with someone from Toronto or are you exclusively New York City?
Oh, no. The funny thing is what my consulting actually is I do office hours. So there's a bunch of hours that are reserved for like my multi-million clients. I mean, if I'm being honest now, I'm starting to get to the point that it's like it's reserved for a bunch of artists I've been fans of for years because I work with so many musicians that I really have loved over the years that like here's a bunch of people who buy my time on a regular basis that I like working with because I've been a fan of theirs.
Yeah.
Then outside of that, I have what I call office hours where anybody can pay money, get on a call and pick my brain for an hour. You could buy 1 to 2 hours of credit. And you can, if you don't want to, if you get on that call for 15, 30 minutes and I'm like, you should do this, this, and this. You can drop off that call and come back and use the credit later.
Oh,
I
cool.
basically just sell my time, because what that does is it keeps me in touch with, there's a few problems that like the artists I talk to with 18 monthly listeners and 18 million both have that are the same. For example, they all hate their fans also like section on Spotify. Every one of them wishes that was dead, but I need to learn from a wide swath of people, and I get to talk to a lot of really interesting people, and it keeps me really inspired. I mean, just the last 2 weeks, I talked to 2 groups who are doing very well. They're in the hundreds, thousands of monthly listeners, and honestly, I learned more from hearing their pain points, because they're very new pain points that have like kind of developed in recent times, which is that like, a good example is like getting people out to shows can be very different from genre to genre. For a blues rock band compared to an EDM band, it's very different pain points of what's happening right now in behavior.
Interesting. It sounds like therapy, actually.
There's this very funny thing of so my wife is a therapist, and she's actually now has a practice for creatives. So, and we kind of joke that there's a lot of times you should not be on with me, you should be on with her.
Yeah, or vice versa, maybe.
It's usually you should be on with
Usually it's the other way around.
her. She's a licensed therapist who could deal with your trauma and things like that. I'm a guy who knows a lot about like your creative problems and like your marketing problems. You do not want to talk to me about your trauma.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
So we have about 15 minutes left, and again, I just want to say before we kind of get to the near end, like this has been a real treat, and like I'm grateful to have this opportunity to like again like share what you're doing, because like doing the office hours, doing the content, like you benefit from the content because you get awareness of what you're doing, but like you're providing so much value.
Yeah.
And even with my radio show, like I feel like I get so much out of this show versus like playing live, like playing music, because of the giving back element. So, like I just thanks for coming on. I just want to say that.
I appreciate the opportunity. This has been very fun so far.
Okay, so I have a question about a musician who's maybe been doing this for a few years. Okay, this isn't me. I'm just like playing the character. Mm-hmm. I'm 18. I graduate high school, and I'm doing the music thing. And so maybe I'm working with you, Jesse, and I've got 10,000, 100,000 streams. Or less, or whatever, and you're hustling, you're getting people to shows, you're doing the boots on the ground, like you're doing everything. You're doing content, you're learning editing. You get to 25, 26, 27, and maybe you're starting to get tired.
Sure.
Right? Like it's a lot. And I see from a lot of my guests who come on the show, how are they doing it? And a lot of them are doing music kind of on the side and not doing it as their full-time thing. And I think a lot of people who are in music don't give themselves enough credit for the skills that they have. So a question I have for you is, like, what are some skills that maybe artists in 2025, what skills do they have that like they don't realize they have that are possibly employable, where they can kind of have a work-life balance of playing music and using those skills in a professional setting?
Yeah, I mean, a thing I tell people all the time is, learn Airtable. It's so
Sorry, what's Airtable?
So Airtable are spreadsheets on crack. You can do so much with them. It's incredible. It's really funny because I don't even think I do enough with them, and then yet every time I like take on a new project with people and I'm like, all right, let's use Airtable for this, they're like, oh my God, this is crazy. I'm like, I am like at 10% knowledge of what this thing can do. Like, we're using this at barely anything. If you are an expert at Airtable, you can walk into nearly every office that is not yet using it and blow their fucking minds, and also save everyone in the office so much time. It is a powerhouse of automating dumb communications that don't need to happen, making visibility across a project, and making repeatable steps that you can do for things over and over again. I use it literally, so my company, we manage 13 different podcasts. It's like I own New York's biggest podcast studio, and I own a podcast production company. And like a good way we keep everybody, because we work with some people who make musicians seem like good communicators. And we also work with some people who are very famous and rich and talented, who are very stretched thin and type 5-word all caps answers to us on a regular basis. This makes it so that there is awareness and we can see and accountability within a system. There's reminders, there's all sorts of things. Now, another thing, if you are getting burnt out, 9 times out of 10 when I coach through burnout, it is mostly due to one, false perceptions of what you should be expecting. So a good example is one of the most common things I get in the burnout thing is, I wrote 7 people to collaborate on a song and only 3 wrote back of the 7. And I'm like, that's
a really great percentage, actually.
Yeah. Like I'm like, that means you're like basically like if we were in baseball, like you'd be considered like on the all-star team.
You're doing pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. Like a lot of people don't realize how bad the numbers are in the system. And so because of that, they're very depressed, and there's a lot of expectations that people don't get. It's even like one of the things that I blow people's minds with all the time is I'm like, I talk a lot about a proof of concept period. So like what it is that if you have a certain amount of monthly listeners, that if you're just doing nothing but just like your baseline stuff, if you're maintaining this monthly listeners in certain genres, then you really have achieved proof of concept that people just like what you do. And they'll come on like, I don't know what to do. No one likes me. Like I used to literally, my old best friend who stopped doing music because of mental health issues, I'd have to always tell him, I'm like, you're in the top, not 1%, but 0.7% of musicians in the world's audience. And you put out a record once a year and never fall below 30,000 monthly listeners, no matter what you do. That makes you in this genre one of the top people in the genre. And he would treat it, though, like this should be a thing I've failed at in my life. I should not go home to my family reunion because God has besmirched me and I should not show my face. A lot of burnout is realigning the mental ills of our society. And one of the other mental ills I really deal with people on calls about a lot is what their relationship is with their phone and the bad habits they have with their phone. Because I always say, like, my wife was concerned when we first started dating that the phone is nutrition to me because I don't have bad things that torment me on it all day because I don't allow it to do that. When I get an email, I don't get a notification because it's often somebody saying, what the fuck is going on with this thing that they fucked up and not me. I'm not going to get mad about it until I'm ready to be in a zone where I'm going to do it. And I can afford that. But the thing is, you have to make your mental health healthy with that phone that you interface with all day.
Yeah, and I find too, like, especially when you start doing content, I'm a musician, I'm a guitar player, I'm a whatever EDM artist, and I do it in my bedroom. But now if I want to release it to the world, I'm now entering the world of social media. And that can, I guess if you don't have a good relationship with it or you're not sure how to navigate it, it can really take you over. And I'm guilty of like falling into that a couple times as I'm going through. But like these conversations I think are really helpful.
Yeah, and whether it's the addiction to likes, it's the dopamine that you get. We have to find healthy balances with it, and a lot of that stuff it can be. I'm not always the biggest fan of like. I try to not make videos about mindset very much. There's enough people doing that, but a lot of this stuff is like reframing what you need to look at things as and what your goals are, and are you getting close to your goal? One of the main things I tell people who are older who are doing things is, oftentimes we're just trying to honor, like what I do with my YouTube channel, the way I look at it is I am honoring making my life more cool by devoting hours to this.
Yeah.
And that's all I've been doing. I have a very good quote unquote day job where I have this podcast company that does fine. I have great managers. I don't have to who make it so I can devote time to my fun job, which is music. But like at the end of the day, I'm just trying to make my life cooler. I'm trying to work with more artists whose music I love.
Yeah, and I feel like if you can kind of keep your mission or your goal in mind, then it's like the goalposts don't move as much on you, right? So it's like if my goal is 10,000 followers, right? As you hit that 10,000, your brain goes, what's 50 feel like?
Yep.
And now 10 feels like nothing.
No, and I heard recently there was a genius thing on this podcast I love called the Ion Pack that they talk about that. A lot of times the problem too is, you hit this number. So, I hit 100,000 on YouTube recently, and like I come home, I'm still living in the same house.
Yep.
Like the money didn't change. Like all these things didn't change. Same thing. My friend won a Grammy the other week. They're like, yeah. And I still live in a shithole because I have to wait till the place I bought gets redone. And like, I'm literally living in a hellhole with cockroaches still.
Yeah. I think what's his name? Jim Carrey said something like, if you were famous for a day, I wish everyone was famous for a day or something like that. So they'd realize that it doesn't mean anything. And it's like, it's just fascinating. But I think the key is to kind of go back is if you have your goal, if you have your mission and you stick to that, like that's once you fulfill that, the numbers don't matter. They don't mean anything. And it's all good. It's all good.
It was actually very funny when I hit 100,000 on YouTube, which was a thing that was a goal. I had like 3 days of very bad mental health. And to be honest with you, I'm very usually the same mood. Let's call it 345 days a year. I'm in a pretty good mood. And I was convinced it was my brain rewiring. That like, this was my goal. This was what I was working for 5 years, and it was gone. And my brain kind of didn't know how to be motivated, what to do. Like I was still hitting the YouTube Studio app to see where I was. And like, it's like, no, we're done with that part of the life now.
So how did you have to take like a break or like what happened?
No, I mean, it was only a couple days ago. So,
sorry.
It has not been a few days. It has not been more than 5 days now. No, I think there was this funny thing is like I got realigned, and like it just became like, no, you're honoring a better life that you could have, and it's the same thing like with any musician. It's like I always say, it's like I did have a really good rule for myself. I only look at the numbers, literally once a week. I do it when my mental health is best. Is I do it Friday night before I know I'm going to get a very nice reward, because most Friday nights I go out with my wife to a nice dinner and I'm going to have a great time hanging out with her. So I like right before that, if the numbers are bad, I get a dose of bad and then I'm going to have a dose of good. If the numbers are good, well, I'm going to get even more good.
I love that. These are good lessons. This is beyond the strategy. This is good stuff.
Thank you.
Okay. Local versus online. So would you rather be, and there might not be a hard yes or no, but like, is it better to have like a really strong local following, or better to have like a big following online, or is there no clear-cut winner in this situation?
No, I think the online one does win, because what I would say is it's easier to build off of to bigger things. There's this weird thing that with a lot of people is that, with online, obviously it could be bots, it could be things, but that's pretty easy for any professional spot. With local, people kind of never, like, they almost believe that there's got to be some secret sauce, like, oh, is it that the singer is just like the neighborhood Lothario who sleeps with everyone, or like, are they the best coke dealer in the town? Like, they'll make up a hypothesis that's like, there's so many different scenarios for it, whereas online, if it is legit, it's all so much easier to build off of.
Okay, I like that. Okay, so how do I ask this question? If I'm suspicious of someone who has like a lot of followers online, like, do a lot of people still use bots? Is that still a thing? Like, or have they is that kind of been weeded out? Is it growing? Is it not growing? Like, what's the situation with bots these days?
Diminishing for sure when it comes to Spotify and YouTube. What I would say is a funny thing that will probably happen in the next 2 years is that we won't be discussing bots as much anymore because the technology to get rid of inauthentic behavior is getting very, very good. I've watched some amazing demos in some meetings. It's very easy to spot, and there's reasons it hasn't been spotted that are way too long to talk about now. But what I would say is this, is inauthentic behavior has lots of telltale signs to anyone who's been in the business for a while. And, like one of the things I tell musicians all the time is, a good example. One of my good friends is like we were out, I was at her show in LA and she's like, yo, look, this person got a tattoo of my lyrics. And I'm like, you see, that's what you put online is the carousel as you collect those. And I tell the story all the time is like the band I managed, Man Overboard, when in around 2010, one of the ways we got a lot of label attention is we had a MySpace photo album of all the tattoos of our lyrics that people were getting because you can't fake that enthusiasm.
Unless you just tattooed your own body.
Yeah, well, I should say this. There was pictures of the people, and this was pre the I forget what those tattoos are that are very temporary now. Yeah, there's
henna or whatever.
There's month-long ones like over in Williamsburg by where I live. There's like a Ephemeral is the tattoo company, and the idea is that they don't last, but they look real.
I don't mind that actually. I don't mind that. As someone who doesn't have any tattoos because I have commitment issues, I guess. But
I understand.
Yeah. Okay, so if I'm choosing, I can wake up tomorrow, I'm a new musician, and I have the option of having 100,000 followers on Instagram or TikTok, whatever, or 100,000 followers on Spotify. Which one am I choosing?
Spotify, because what that usually is a real relationship with you and shows enthusiasm. Follow usually is more enthusiasm that could be converted. One of the funniest things that happens in my member feed is somebody be like, look at this 3 million view TikTok. Why does the song have 40,000 streams? And then I go, did you hear the song? Who would click through to hear that? I see that a lot. There's a lot of people who are very good at getting attention, and it's like a hard thing for me to break to them that I'm like, they're not going over there because you made a good video that's very engaging, but this song is fucking rough on the ears.
Yeah. So that begs the question of what you're in it for. If you're in it to just have a face online, then it doesn't matter whether it's the music or the TikTok, right? But
yeah, well, I mean, I think the funny thing is there is a narcissism towards not narcissistic scale. And there's some people who are just happy with any attention. They're very, very excited to have any of this. Like I always say is the crazy thing is when we talk about reward systems in our brains, talking to a narcissist about the reward system on calls is a very funny thing because they don't think the way I think. Is they are so rewarded by any attention and it kind of doesn't matter what it is.
That's fascinating.
They just want more.
Yeah, it's tough. And then it gets rewarded in the algorithm, and then the world becomes more negative, I guess. I don't know. Here's a question for you. Okay, so I don't know if I can... I want to get this right. I think you talked about one time thinking of a streaming platform that's better for artists. Is this something that you thought of?
No. I put out a 40-page white paper and full podcast on when I tried to build a Spotify that would pay artists more justly and why I could not do it.
Tell them, okay, this is the wrong time to ask this question, but I just remembered it. So I gotta hear it. What were your thoughts? Why didn't it work? Could it happen? And that's too many questions. I'll leave it there.
Well, I can give you a really simple thing. The main reason why we do not have a better Spotify and Audius is trying to build it and why Audius is not flocked to by a lot of people is Spotify and all the streaming services technically operate on an agreement with the major labels that says we are going to ignore some rules that we're not going to enforce, just as the TikTok ban right now. Technically, TikTok is banned in America. What Biden did first, then Trump followed him doing, saying, I'm not going to enforce the law. Just as the same way that in New York City, there's a law against jaywalking. You do not get tickets for jaywalking. are told not to enforce this law. Same thing with smoking weed. It is still illegal. It is non-enforced behavior. What we have is an agreement between the major labels and Merlin and the other performing rights services that say, I am not going to come for you for this thing because of various reasons, mostly because they were bleeding fucking money and they needed somebody with an answer. And RDO and Pandora were not giving them it. So the point being, the amount of capital you have to raise to put up the money to say, even if I fail, you're going to do it, is a lot more than anybody can raise from venture capital. That where venture capital, we have to remember, wants a 10-to-1 win on most of their investments, if not more. When you say to them, we're going to put up all this money and you might get it back, they say, bye-bye, honey. So I went through the ringers. I interviewed everybody. I'm very lucky. For people who don't know, it's like I work with journalistic outlets like Rolling Stone and Daily Beast. I can get access to all the top minds and things. I'm very, very lucky this way. I have talked to, in the last 10 years, I have probably talked to every legal and logistical mind about this, trying to find a way around it. And the real thing is we have set up a system that fucking sucks. And the only way to get rid of Spotify and get these people to stop paying would be for a mass artist union to happen. And the biggest problem we have in our society these days is there's absolutely no class solidarity, because unfortunately we built a system where Thomas Frank, one of my favorite people I get to talk to about politics, has this really good point that when you see those lawn signs that say, I believe Black Lives Matter, I believe science is right, I believe equal rights for gay people, they always leave one thing off. I believe that everybody should be given a livable wage. And what it is we have a fucking stupid attitude in this country about merit and the merit of art and what you should be paid for it. So we do not have big artists, for the most part, who support small artists getting paid, because everybody believes their merit is their merit and they should be rewarded for it. And until we get rid of that disbelief and we have solidarity amongst musicians as a whole for what we should do and take on Spotify, this is the system we're stuck with, unless mass revolution happens for some reason, like what's happening in our politics right now.
I love it. I don't know what to say. I'm going to leave that. I
was going to say that I kind of went a little too hard there, but yes.
No, because you make me think about, like, it's not just music, man. It's like, it's like that's how it is in all, CEOs getting 50 million a year, and like, so and so doing all the work is making 50,000, right? Like.
Thomas Frank has written about this for 30 years, that the biggest problem and ailment in our society is that what we see is poor people vote for rich people's interest because they believe they'll be one of them one day, because they are out of their fucking minds.
Okay, 2 last questions, I swear.
Okay,
one,
that's fine.
Favorite album that you always go back to?
Okay, I'm going to do the most recent one that has come into my life that I consistently go to. All Day Gentle Hold by Porches, but probably favorite album is still the first 1975 record.
Love it. If you had one song that you could listen to, that's the only song you could listen to for the rest of your life, what song is it?
It's Hard Out by the 1975. I have it tattooed on my arm right there.
Nice. And last one. What was the name of your first band?
We were called Caution. And everybody's like, oh, it's the Operation Ivy song, right? And I'm like, no, we existed before that. So I can't even pretend to be that cool.
Jesse Cannon, thank you so much for coming on. This has been wonderful. If anyone wants to get a hold of you, where can they find you?
Okay, that's very, very easy. All you have to do is you can go to jessecannon.com. You can go to MUSFORMATIONLabs.com if you just want to see what I do in music. That has a whole bunch of stuff. Or you can write Jesse Cannon YouTube, and that'll lead you down a whole lot of paths. And the descriptions of every one of my videos is like links to free stuff for musicians, all the things I ever do, and stuff like that.